In the shadowed heart of Poitou, where mist clung to the earth like a lover's breath, a forest whispered secrets older than the stones. The locals called it the Bois de Fée, a place where the air thrummed with unseen eyes, and the trees seemed to sigh with human voices. Mélusine, a name half forgotten yet heavy with mystery, was said to haunt its depths, her presence a flicker of moonlight on a still pond. She was no mere sprite, no common wisp of folklore, but a creature of power, woven from the threads of both heaven and earth. The villagers spoke of her in hushed tones, their words laced with awe and dread, as if her name alone could summon a storm. A young man named Raymondin, bold yet burdened by a shadowed past, stumbled into this forest one moonless night. His heart, heavy with guilt, sought solace in the unknown, unaware that fate was about to bind him to a legend.
Raymondin's boots sank into the damp earth, each step a confession to the silent woods. He had fled the court of Poitou after a hunt gone wrong, where his spear had pierced not a boar, but his lord's heart. The accident, or so he called it, had branded him an outcast, a man cursed by his own hand. In the Bois de Fée, he hoped to lose himself, to let the forest swallow his shame. But the air grew thick, the shadows deeper, and a strange melody curled through the trees, soft as a lullaby, yet sharp as a blade. It led him to a clearing where a fountain sparkled, its waters unnaturally bright under the starless sky. There, by the water's edge, stood a woman whose beauty made the night itself pause. Her hair was a cascade of silver, catching light that had no source, and her eyes held the depth of a storm-tossed sea. "Who are you, wanderer, to tread where mortals fear?" she asked, her voice a melody that both soothed and unnerved. Raymondin, struck dumb by her presence, could only stammer his name, his guilt forgotten in her gaze. She called herself Mélusine, a guardian of the fountain, a keeper of secrets older than the hills. "Stay," she said, "and I will offer you redemption, but only if you swear an oath." He nodded, entranced as she spoke of a pact. He must never seek her on the 7th day of each week. The weight of her words settled on him like a mantle, both promise and peril. The forest seemed to hold its breath as Raymondin swore his vow, his voice trembling but resolute. Mélusine's smile was a riddle, both warm and distant, as if she saw beyond the moment into centuries unseen. She led him from the clearing, her steps silent on the moss, to a meadow where the stars suddenly bloomed above. There, she spoke of a castle she would build for him, a fortress of stone and magic to rival any in Poitou. "With me," she whispered, "you will rise above your shame, but betray my trust, and all will crumble." Raymondin, caught in her spell, saw visions of grandeur, of a life reborn from the ashes of his past. Yet, in the pit of his stomach, a seed of doubt took root, small but persistent. Days bled into weeks, and Mélusine's promise took form as Lusignan Castle rose from the earth, its towers piercing the clouds. The villagers, once wary of Raymondin, now bowed to him, their whispers of his curse replaced by tales of his fortune. Mélusine, ever at his side, was a vision of grace, her laughter like bells in the morning mist. She bore him children, each marked by a strange beauty, eyes too large, teeth too sharp, yet radiant with her unearthly charm. But every 7th day she vanished, leaving Raymondin alone in their vast halls. The seed of doubt grew, fed by whispers from courtiers who envied his rise. "What does she hide?" they murmured, their words coiling around his heart like thorns.
Raymondin tried to drown the whispers, filling his days with feasts and hunts, but the seventh day gnawed at him. Melusine's absences grew longer, her returns quieter, as if she carried a weight he could not see. One night, a courtier named Guyon, with eyes like a fox and a tongue sharper still, cornered him. "She's no mortal, my lord," Guyon hissed, his words dripping with malice. "What wife hides from her husband? What creature shuns the light?" Raymondin's heart raced, torn between loyalty and the gnawing need to know. As the next seventh day loomed, he stood at the edge of their chamber, a forbidden door before him, its lock glinting like a challenge. The door seemed to pulse with a life of its own, its wood warm under Raymondin's trembling fingers. He knew the oath, felt its weight like chains, yet the whispers of doubt were louder now, a chorus in his blood. Beyond the door a faint hum rose, like the song from the fountain that first drew him to her. Was it Melusine's voice, or something older, something that could unravel him? He pressed his ear to the wood, his breath shallow, caught between love and betrayal. The castle was silent, the world holding its breath, as if the next moment would rewrite their fate. And then a sound, a soft, slithering rustle, stirred from within, pulling him closer to the edge of the forbidden. The door's slithering hum grew louder, a siren's call that tugged at Raymondin's soul. His fingers grazed the lock, cold as a winter stream, yet burning with the weight of his oath. He whispered Melusine's name, half prayer, half plea, as if she might answer through the wood. The castle's silence was a living thing, pressing against him, urging him to turn back. Yet the whispers of Guyon and the courtiers echoed in his mind, their venom seeping into his resolve. He turned the key, the click sharp as a snapped bone, and the door creaked open to reveal a chamber bathed in unearthly light. What lay within was no mortal sight, and Raymondin's heart stuttered as he crossed the threshold.
The chamber was vast, its walls shimmering like the inside of a pearl, carved with patterns that seemed to shift and breathe. At its heart stood a pool, its waters still as glass, reflecting a light that came from nowhere and everywhere. Mélusine was there, but not as Raymondin knew her. Her lower half was a serpent's tail, scales glinting like moonlit armor. Her eyes, those storm-deep eyes, met his, and in them he saw no anger, only sorrow vast as the sea. "You have broken your oath," she said, her voice a melody now laced with pain. Raymondin staggered back, his mind a tempest of awe and terror, unable to speak. The air grew heavy, the chamber's light dimming, as if the world itself mourned his betrayal.
Mélusine rose from the pool, her tail dissolving into mist, her form once more the woman he loved. "You saw what I am," she said, "yet you cannot unsee what binds us still." She spoke of her curse, a secret forged in a time when gods walked among men, her fate tied to the fountain's ancient magic. Raymondin, trembling, begged forgiveness, his words tumbling like leaves in a storm. She touched his face, her fingers cool as spring water, and promised to stay, if he could keep her secret. But her eyes held a warning, sharp as a blade. One more betrayal would sunder them forever. As she led him from the chamber, the door sealed itself shut, its lock clicking like a final judgment. The days that followed were a fragile dance, each step shadowed by the weight of what Raymondin had seen. Mélusine was as radiant as ever, her laughter filling Lusignan's halls, yet her gaze lingered on him longer, searching. The courtiers, sensing a crack in their lord's armor, spun new tales, tales of serpents, of witches, of a woman who was no woman at all.
Guyon, ever the fox, pressed closer, his words dripping with false concern. "What did you see, my lord, behind that door?" Raymondon's silence only fueled their whispers, and the seed of doubt in his heart grew into a thorny vine. He began to watch Mélusine, noting her grace, her strength, and the faint shimmer in her eyes that no mortal could claim. By the next 7th day, his resolve wavered, torn between love and the gnawing need to know more.
Mélusine, sensing his unease, drew him to the castle's highest tower, where the winds sang of forgotten times. "Do you trust me, Raymondin?" she asked, her voice soft as a lullaby, yet heavy with unspoken truths. He swore he did, but his eyes betrayed him, darting to the horizon as if seeking answers there. She spoke of their children, of the legacy they could build, a dynasty to outlast the stars. Yet she warned him again, "Speak of what you saw, and our bond will shatter like glass." The tower's stones seemed to hum with her words, as if the castle itself were alive, bound to her will. As they descended, Raymondin's heart pounded, caught between her love and the courtier's poison. The court grew restless, its halls buzzing with rumors that Mélusine was no mere lady, but a creature of the old world. Guyon, emboldened, gathered allies, their voices a chorus of suspicion that echoed through Lusignan's corridors. They spoke of ancient tales, of fae who lured men to ruin, of serpents who wore human skin. Raymondin, torn, sought solace in the castle's chapel, its stained glass casting fractured light across his face. He prayed for guidance, but the saints offered no answers, their eyes as cold as the stones. Mélusine found him there, her presence a balm and a burden, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "The truth is a heavy thing," she whispered, "but silence is heavier still." As the next 7th day approached, Raymondin's resolve crumbled under the weight of whispers and his own fears. He followed Mélusine in secret, his steps silent as a thief's, to a hidden garden where the fountain from their first meeting stood reborn. Its waters glowed, and she stood beside it, her form shimmering as if caught between worlds. He hid among the roses, their thorns pricking his skin as she sang a song that stirred the air with ancient power. The words were not human, their cadence twisting like a river through time. Raymondin's breath caught as her form flickered, scales glinting faintly, before she turned back to the woman he loved. The garden seemed to close in around him, its beauty a trap, its secrets a blade poised above their fate. The garden's roses seemed to bleed shadows as Raymondin crouched, his heart a drumbeat against the silence. Mélusine's song wove through the air, each note a thread of magic that made the fountain's waters pulse. Her form flickered again, scales glinting like stars before fading back to human grace. He wanted to call out, to beg for truth, but fear chained his tongue. The thorns bit deeper, a reminder of his broken oath, yet he could not turn away. Above, the sky churned with clouds that hadn't been there moments before, as if nature itself sensed the rift. As Mélusine turned, her eyes locked onto his hiding place, and Raymondin felt the weight of eternity in her gaze. Mélusine stepped toward him. Her movements flew at his water, her face a mask of sorrow and resolve. "You follow me still, Raymondin," she said, her voice soft but edged with a warning. "Each step you take frays the thread that binds us." He stumbled from the roses, thorns tearing at his cloak, and fell to his knees before her. Words spilled from him, apologies, questions, pleas, but they tangled like vines in his throat. She knelt beside him, her hand cool against his fevered brow, and whispered of a curse older than the stones of Poitou. I am bound to this world by love and by pain, and you hold both in your hands.
The night passed like a fever dream, and by dawn Mélusine led Raymondin back to Lusignan's halls, her silence louder than any words. The castle seemed different now, its stones humming with a secret life, as if it breathed with her. Raymondin swore to guard her truth, but the courtiers' whispers grew bolder, their eyes glinting like knives in the dark. Guyon, ever the serpent in human form, pressed him at a feast, his voice low. "What hides in your lady's heart, my lord?" Raymondin's hand tightened on his goblet, the wine trembling like his resolve. Mélusine, seated at his side, seemed to sense the storm within him, her smile a fragile shield. As the feast ended, she drew him aside and whispered, "Trust me, or we are lost." The days grew heavy with unspoken truths, and Raymondin found no peace in the castle's vastness. He wandered its corridors, haunted by the memory of Mélusine's serpentine form, her sorrow etched into his soul. The courtiers' tales spun wilder, tales of fey queens, of cursed brides who brought ruin to mortal men. In the village below, whispers turned to fear, and offerings appeared at the forest's edge to appease the spirit of the fountain. Raymondin's eldest son, Jaffrey, with eyes too large and teeth too sharp, began to ask questions, his gaze unnervingly like his mother's. Mélusine, ever watchful, taught her children in secret, her lessons filled with songs of ancient rivers and forgotten stars. Raymondin, caught between love and dread, felt the walls of his world closing in. One night, a storm lashed Lusignan, its winds howling like the cries of lost souls. Raymondin found Mélusine in the castle's library, poring over a tome bound in silver, its pages glowing faintly. She spoke of a prophecy, her voice low, about a time when her kind would fade from the world. "I stay for you, for our children," she said, "but the truth cannot be buried forever." Raymondin, desperate, asked what she was, what bound her to this half-life of secrets. Her answer was a riddle. "I am the river that carves the stone, the shadow that shapes the light." As lightning split the sky, he saw her eyes flicker with something ancient, and his fear grew sharper than his love. The courtiers, led by Guyon, grew bolder, their whispers now open accusations at court. They spoke of Mélusine as a sorceress, a creature who wove spells to bind Raymondin's soul. A priest from the village, his eyes wild with zeal, demanded she be brought to trial for witchcraft. Raymondin, torn, stood before the court, his voice shaking as he defended her. But Bout gnawed at him, and his words faltered when Guyon asked, "Can you swear she is human, my lord?" Mélusine, standing tall, met their gazes with a calm that chilled the room. "Judge me," she said, "and you judge the heart of this land." As the seventh day dawned, Raymondin could bear it no longer, and followed Mélusine to a hidden chamber beneath the castle. The air was thick with the scent of water and stone, and a faint hum filled the space, like the pulse of the earth itself. There, Mélusine stood before a mirror of polished obsidian, her reflection showing not a woman, but a serpent coiled in starlight. She turned, unsurprised, and said, "You cannot stop seeking, can you?" Her voice was weary, yet her eyes held a fire that could burn through centuries. Raymondin, trembling, asked if she would ever be free of her curse. The mirror's light flared, and her answer hung in the air like a storm about to break. "Only if you can love what you fear." The obsidian mirror's light pulsed like a heartbeat, casting Mélusine's serpentine reflection in a dance of shadow and starlight. Raymondin stood frozen, his breath caught in the weight of her words, to love what he feared. Her eyes, ancient and endless, held him as if peering through the veil of time itself. "The choice is yours," she said, her voice a tide pulling him toward an abyss. He reached for her, desperate to bridge the chasm between them, but the mirror's glow flared, blinding him. When his vision cleared, she was gone, the chamber empty, save for the hum of the earth. Raymondin stumbled back, the mirror now dark, its surface a silent accusation of his wavering heart.
Raymondin searched the castle, his calls echoing through halls that seemed to mourn her absence. The courtiers, sensing weakness, gathered like wolves, their whispers now a roar of accusation, led by Guyon's venomous tongue. "She has fled, my lord," Guyon sneered, "because her secrets can no longer hide." The priest, emboldened, called for a hunt, claiming Mélusine's magic threatened the soul of Poitou. Raymondin's heart rebelled, but doubt gnawed deeper, twisting love into suspicion. He stood in the courtyard, the wind carrying the faint sound of her song from the forest beyond. Their eldest son, Geoffrey, watched him with those two large eyes, silently pleading for him to act.
Driven by a mix of love and desperation, Raymondin rode into the Bois des Fées, the forest's mist curling around him like a lover's embrace. The fountain from their first meeting gleamed ahead, its waters singing her name in a language older than stone. He dismounted, calling for her, his voice breaking under the weight of his guilt. A ripple stirred the fountain, and Mélusine appeared, her form half human, half serpent, radiant yet untouchable. "Why do you seek me still?" she asked, her voice a melody of sorrow and steel. Raymondin fell to his knees, confessing his fear, his love, and the accusations tearing their world apart. She listened, her eyes unreadable, and said, "To save us, you must face the fire of truth."
Mélusine led him deeper into the forest, to a glade where the air shimmered with the ghosts of forgotten ages. She spoke of her mother, a fey queen who bound her to a curse for a sin long buried in time. "I am neither mortal nor spirit," she said, "but a bridge between worlds, tethered by love." Raymondin listened, his heart aching with the weight of her truth, yet burning with questions unanswered. She warned him of a coming trial, a moment when their bond would be tested by fire and blood. "Stand with me," she urged, "or all we've built will turn to ash." As they parted, the glade's light dimmed, leaving Raymondin alone with the echo of her words. Back at Lusignan, the court was a cauldron of chaos, the priest and Guyon rallying the villagers to purge the serpent's curse. Torches lit the night as a mob gathered, their chants rising like a storm against the castle walls. Raymondin stood at the gates, his sword drawn, torn between protecting Mélusine and quelling the fear he'd helped ignite. Geoffrey and his siblings, marked by their mother's unearthly traits, stood beside him, their eyes fierce with loyalty. Mélusine appeared atop the ramparts, her silhouette a vision against the torchlight, her voice silencing the crowd. "You call me monster, but I am the lifeblood of this land." The mob wavered, but Guyon's cry for justice reignited their fury, and the night erupted into chaos. Raymondin thought to hold the gates, his heart torn as the mob's cries grew louder, their torches casting jagged shadows. Mélusine descended, her presence calming the air, but her eyes held a storm that chilled him. She spoke of a ritual, one that could break her curse but risked everything they'd built. "It requires trust," she said, "and a sacrifice neither of us can yet name."
Remondin, gripped by fear, asked if her freedom would mean losing her forever. Her silence was answer enough, and the castle seemed to groan under the weight of their unspoken choice. As the mob breached the gates, Melusine's hand found his, her touch a promise and a plea. In the castle's heart, Mélusine led Raymondin to a hidden altar, its stone pulsing with the same hum as the fountain. She spoke of the ritual's cost, a truth revealed to the world, a bond broken or forged anew. The mob's cries echoed closer, their torches flickering through the castle's windows like stars gone mad. Raymondin's children gathered, their strange beauty a mirror of their mother's power, their eyes pleading for him to choose her. "I am yours," Mélusine whispered, "but only if you can bear my truth." He nodded, his heart a battlefield, as she began to chant, her voice weaving light into the air. The altar glowed, the castle trembled, and the world held its breath as their fate hung in the balance. The altar's glow pulsed like a dying star, its light weaving through Mélusine's chant as the mob's cries clawed at the castle walls. Raymondin stood by her side, his hand still clasped in hers, trembling with the weight of her truth. Their children, with their uncanny eyes and sharp teeth, formed a silent circle around the altar, their presence a defiant hymn to their mother's legacy. Mélusine's voice rose, a melody of ancient rivers and forgotten skies, calling forth a power that made the stones of Lucerne tremble. "This is our last chance," she whispered to Raymondin, her eyes blazing with both love and sorrow. The mob breached the inner hall, torches casting jagged shadows, led by Guyon and the priest, their faces twisted with zeal. As the altar's light flared, Raymondin made his choice, his heart breaking under the strain of love and fear. The ritual's power surged, a tide of light that drowned the mob's cries, and the castle seemed to breathe with Mélusine's will. She turned to Raymondin, her voice steady. "Speak my truth, and I may be free, but all we built may fall." He hesitated, his eyes darting to the mob, to Guyon's sneer, to the priest's raised cross. "She is no monster," he shouted, his voice cracking, but the words felt hollow against the weight of doubt. The mob faltered, some dropping their torches, swayed by the light and his plea, but Guyon's voice cut through. "She is a serpent, a deceiver." Mélusine's gaze met Raymondin's, and in that moment he saw the cost of his wavering heart. The altar's light flickered, and a crack split the stone, as if the earth itself mourned their faltering bond. Mélusine raised her hands, and the air shimmered with the ghosts of her past, figures of fae and ancient rivers swirling around her. "I am Mélusine," she declared, her voice a storm that silenced the mob, bound by love, cursed by truth. The priest lunged, his cross held high, but the light from the altar repelled him, sending him sprawling. Raymondin stepped forward, his heart a battlefield, and swore to stand by her, but his voice trembled with the shadow of doubt. The children, led by Geoffrey, joined their mother's chant, their voices weaving a harmony that shook the castle's foundations. The mob scattered, some fleeing in awe, others in fear, but Guyon remained, his eyes burning with malice. As Mélusine's chant reached its peak, her form began to dissolve into light, and Raymondin cried out, realizing too late what he stood to lose. The altar crumbled, its light fading, and Mélusine's form became a wisp of silver mist, her serpentine tail coiling into the air. "You could not love what you feared," she whispered, her voice echoing in Raymondin's soul as she faded. The castle groaned, its towers trembling as if mourning her departure, and the mob fell silent, awestruck. Raymondin fell to his knees, his hands grasping at the mist, But she was gone, leaving only the hum of the fountain's song. The children stood around him, their faces a mix of grief and defiance, their mother's legacy burning in their eyes. Guillaume and the priest fled into the night, their accusations drowned by the weight of what they'd witnessed. Lusignan stood, but its heart was broken, its walls forever marked by the echo of Mélusine's truth.
Years passed, and Lusignan became a place of legend, its towers whispered to be haunted by Mélusine's spirit. Raymondin grew old, his hair gray as the mist, his heart heavy with the weight of his choices. The children, marked by their mother's unearthly beauty, carried her legacy, ruling with wisdom and strength that echoed her power. Villagers left offerings at the fountain, now a shrine, praying for her blessing or her forgiveness. Geoffrey, now a man, stood by the fountain one night, hearing her song in the wind, a promise of her return. The forest seemed to whisper her name, its shadows curling like serpents around the castle. And in the silence of the seventh day, a faint light flickered in the water, hinting that Mélusine's story was not yet done.
The tale of Mélusine lingered in Poitou, a story told by firesides, a warning and a wonder to those who dared love beyond the mortal veil. Her children's descendants carried her mark, their eyes too bright, their voices too resonant with ancient songs. The fountain remained, its waters never still, singing of a woman who was both serpent and savior. Raymondin's name faded, but his grief lived on in the stones of Lusignan, a testament to a love that could not bear its own truth. Some said Mélusine watched from the shadows, her spirit bound to the land she'd shaped. Others claimed she waited, a whisper in the wind, for a soul brave enough to free her. And on quiet nights, when the moon hid its face, her song could still be heard, calling to those who listened.
The end of Mélusine's tale was not an end, but a pause, a breath held in the heart of Poitou's forests. Her story wove itself into the land, its rivers, its stones, its people, a thread that could never be unraveled. Raymondine's love, though flawed, had built a legacy that outlasted his pain. The children, now legends themselves, carried her light, their lives a bridge between the mortal and the eternal. The fountain's song grew softer, but never silent, a reminder of her promise and her price. And somewhere, in the shadows of the Bois de Fay, Mélusine lingered, her eyes watching, waiting for a time when love could conquer fear. The land held its breath, knowing her story would rise again, like a serpent from the deep.